And now it's time for Make It Happen with David Lorms. He is an award-winning insurance expert, best-selling author, and business owner talking about how to make your life, your career, and business better. Here's David.
Welcome back to another episode of Make It Happen with David Lorms. Kind of on a somber note, though, because we had this recent passing of Robin Williams. And I think that's a pretty sad thing, and we wish his family well. But today on our show, I'm excited because this is a personal friend of mine, and his name is Dr. Anuj Shah. He's an immigration attorney. And welcome. Glad you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, David. I'm glad to be here. It's great to be on with you.
Good. So you're an immigration attorney, and your name is Anuj Shah, so that may mean you're from a different place. So
that's right. That's true. I am originally from a different place. That's right.
So where are you from?
Well, so I personally was born in New York City.
Okay.
And I don't retain much of that accent anymore, but I do love New York so much. I don't live there really because the weather is not suitable to my tropical blood. But my folks actually immigrated here from India. Back in the 70s. My dad's a physician, and I think he immigrated because they needed physicians in the Vietnam War, believe it or not. So that was kind of interesting. That's how my folks came over here, and then they had me. So, yep.
And are you the first child in your family?
It's a funny story. I am the first child in my family, and the name Anuj, for those who may know anything about, it's a name derived from the ancient, classical Sanskrit, and it technically means younger brother. But my parents thought, I don't know if I've said this in public before, but my parents thought it meant first son. So they named me Anuj. But I actually really like the name, so I've kept it. But anyway, so yeah, I am the first, and I have a little sister.
So you grew up in New York?
A little bit. We trickled down. My dad, as I was saying, is a physician, so we did some stuff in New York. Then we went down to New Jersey, Philadelphia, somewhere in Virginia. Then in New Orleans at Tulane is where he did, I think, his fellowship or whatever it is. I get all those terms confused. But he did whatever he did there. And then when he finally finished up everything and he became a gastroenterologist and internal medicine specialist and all that stuff, we moved to Houston. That was back in the early 80s.
Now, so his college career or his university career is what made y'all move from all the different places?
Well, so no, he had already gotten his equivalent of the MD in India. It's called an MBBS over there, and then he came here. But then when you are degreed in another country for medicine, in the United States, you have to pass these other exams. I think they're like a USMLE and these things just so you can get licensed here in the United States. So you have to have an equivalent, here in the United States. So that's what he had to do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But then I guess he was getting different internships and residencies and fellowships and that kind of thing. So we kept moving from place to place.
And so how old were you when you moved to Houston?
I was 9. I still remember we moved on my 9th birthday. I still remember that.
Really?
Yeah.
Welcome to the heat.
Yeah, it was.
Happy
it
birthday.
was. I still remember that. Yeah, that's right. I was born in December, and I do not remember it being cold when we moved here. Yeah, so we moved on my birthday, and it was pretty warm, if I remember right. Yeah.
Now, so you speak several languages,
right,
including that of your parents.
So I speak 5 languages. I grew up with 3. English, Gujarati is the native language of my folks and the one I grew up speaking with them and in the family, extended family in India. And then Hindi is the national language. So, I'm pretty proficient in that too. I understand it really well. And then, I won't be able to talk high philosophy with you in Hindi, I'll confess.
Well, I want to be able to respond. So.
But anyway, then I speak Spanish and French. I learned Spanish in high school, and and being in Texas and doing what I do for a living, it's a great thing to have. And then I lived in Paris for some time after undergraduate. So yeah, that's
so you
what
learned
it is.
French there.
I had taken some college classes in French, and then I got it down pretty well in France. That was I'll share this quick 20-second story. It's one of a moment that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. For those people who know something about French culture or French people, they're very proud of their language and their culture and their history and all that, as they should be. I mean, it's a wonderful place. And, they are very, very picky about language. And I was waiting in the line at the opera, believe it or not, and in Prague. It was spring break. I was studying in Paris at the Sorbonne, and it was spring break, so I went to Prague, among other places, for spring break, and I was in the opera talking to this French woman in line at the opera waiting for tickets. And we were there a while. I don't know, popular. I think we were going to see some Mozart. But anyway, there's the Marriage of Figaro. But anyway, so we were talking, and after about 20 minutes, she looked at me and said, "So, are you French?" I absolutely died. Nobody had ever asked me that before. Now, people did ask me that afterwards for some time, but at that time, I my heart stopped, and it was just it's like a glorious moment. You're like, wow.
Your
like,
accent was so good.
You're
that
like,
they thought
wow.
you were French.
Like, she really thinks I'm French. I mean, that was heart-stopping, amazing. So I'll never forget that moment for the rest of my life. Since you brought it up, I just had to share that. I had never
that's
shared
an interesting
that before.
story. I should have gotten some popcorn.
All right. Yeah, me too. 'Cause I'm not believing it as I tell it to you.
No, that is good. Because as you know, I speak Spanish.
Right.
And my accent's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And so people often think, wow, okay, that's a pretty good accent for a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy.
That's right.
You from Brazil? So anyway, that's funny. So you, at the age of 9, here in Houston, and obviously educated here in Houston, and you learned these other languages just from your family, right?
Right. So growing up,
Besides Spanish and all that, but I mean, your family's native language and then the country's native language, you learned from them, right?
That's right, pretty much. We were very fortunate. Every year we'd go to India for the summer. As a kid, even though I was born in New York, I spent the first year of my life pretty much in India. My folks sent me back to be taking care of extended family there, and they were just getting started here. My dad was doing his medical stuff. My mom was a biochemist. And so I was picking up languages there, and then we go back to India almost every year growing up. And so, the national language there and all the Bollywood, I think people at this point have heard of Bollywood.
Yes.
And even in the United States, it's been popular now for the last few years. So you hear, you see all the Bollywood movies, and they're all in Hindi,
right,
which is their national language, like I said. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got
Was
those.
English a second language for you then?
Well, in some ways, yes, but that's the language that I have studied in my entire life. So I've never formally studied Gujarati or Hindi. So,
That's
English
cool.
is definitely.
Now, is there a section of town that a lot of the Indian people live?
I think the majority of Indians in Houston live in the Sugar Land, kind of Fort Bend County area.
Is that right?
That's my understanding.
And there's stores there that sell all the ingredients for certain kinds of foods and that kind of thing?
That's probably true. I don't really hang out on that side of town very much, although apparently Sugar Land is so nice now. They've been getting really great accolades in the last few months. There's a place called Little India right on Hillcroft, though. If you're on 59 South or whatever and you take the Hillcroft exit, there's a bunch of like 20 or 30 or who knows how many Indian restaurants and little markets and stores. And
that's good.
That's a place to get great, just as a tip for people listening, great authentic Indian food.
Well, that is a good tip.
Yeah. And actually very reasonable.
Well, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where did you go to college?
So I grew up in Houston. I'll just throw a plug in because I'm very happy to have gone there. I went to Kincaid for part of middle school and high school, and I graduated from there. And then I started at a small liberal arts school in Connecticut, actually. But I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'm very tropical blooded, and I really didn't realize how much I would not be able to tolerate cold weather. Right. And it was a school called Wesleyan. It's one of the 3 little Ivies. There's Wesleyan, Williams, and Amherst. And I went to Wesleyan, loved the school, amazing people there. John Cage taught there, people who know something about music, experimental music, that kind of thing. But I just couldn't do it. So after my first year, I transferred to Rice here in Houston, which I'm very happy and very proud to have been an owl and be an alum from Rice.
For sure.
Yeah, it's great.
That means you're somewhat intelligent, I think. If you get to
I
go
don't
to Rice.
know. Yeah, you just got to bribe the admissions committee enough. No, I'm kidding. No, thank you for saying that.
And
yeah.
Kincaid, you must have been living at the Star of Hope to go there.
I will tell you, look, I'm not going to lie. I mean, my dad's a physician. He provided great for us, and we lived a great life. So I'm not going to, lie about it.
No, I'm teasing you.
But I will say there were people I went to school with, made us look like church mice. I mean, they had planes and 20-room mansions, and so it's definitely a spectrum. Even when you're at that level, there are people who are doing decently and doing well, and then there's people who are just like some of the most wealthy people on earth, basically.
So what did you graduate with at Rice?
So at Rice, I studied sociology and film studies, and I did my, I tell people this, and it's sort of an interesting thing, so I'll mention it. I did my senior honors thesis on Madonna, and I made a film on her and her fans, and I wrote my thesis on her, and I thought that was fascinating. That was back in the early 90s when she was just at the peak of her popularity, and people writing academic treatises about her and that kind of thing, so that was fun.
Did you ever get to meet her?
I have been within a few feet of her many times, but I've never actually shaken her hand. And
did you smell her?
She sweat on me. Does that count?
Or spit or anything?
I don't know if she might have spat on me. She might have wanted to if she'd got to know me. No, I'm kidding. But I did get a couple of beads of sweat. And I did wash my hands afterward anyway. It's okay.
Well, I've heard a rumor that you know almost all the lyrics to every song she's ever made.
That's probably true. That's probably true. I do think she's a fantastic cultural icon. I think she moved women and music and culture forward in a way that very few people have in history. In fact, she was voted one of the top 100 influential women of the 20th century.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
agree
on
with
and
all
on.
that.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan,
We
too.
could talk 2 hours just about her, so you better shut me up now and let's talk about other
Okay,
stuff.
so you graduate from Rice,
Yeah.
and then where do you go?
Well, so then I spent a year, like I was saying earlier, I spent a year in Paris at the Sorbonne studying French literature and philosophy and film. That was really fantastic. And then after that, I got my master's and PhD in philosophy because I really fell in love with philosophy after undergraduate, even though my undergrad was in sociology. When I was in Paris, I started to get a whiff of philosophical thought, and so I did my master's back again here in Houston at the University of Houston. Rice didn't have a master's program, just a master's. You had to do a full PhD there, but I wanted to do my PhD at the University of Hawaii, which is where I ended up, which is really one of the best places on earth to do what I did because they do comparative Western and Asian philosophy. So that was wonderful.
Plus the beautiful beach thing.
Yeah, well, that was just, I never went out. I was always holed up in my cubicle studying.
Yes, of
That's
course.
right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
of course.
So,
Poor thing. It just sounds like you've had a tragic life so
been,
far.
It's been rough.
I need the tissues, please.
And where's the violin, right?
Yeah. Okay, so lots of education in film and philosophy. Where did attorney come? Where did that come
Well,
from?
right. So after I did my dissertation and my PhD dissertation, which I'll just throw, since we're talking about all this, it's fun. My topic was on imagining being someone else. So I wrote an entire dissertation, almost 350, 400 pages on that topic. So that was fun. And I did mention Madonna in my dissertation. I had to. Imagine that. I had to continue it, right? I'd done academic
right.
work on her before.
Sure, that makes sense.
Makes sense. But, what happened was really I kind of looked at the academic life, and I'd been an academic for such a long time, and I didn't know that was the life that I wanted, to be a professor. I think it's a noble profession. I'm, great for it's great that people out there are doing it. I don't know that I wanted that. There's a certain component to it. A lot of people may know it's sort of this publish or perish, and, you kind of are always vying to, are you going to be tenured? And there were certain parts of that I thought, I want to be doing something else. I want to be continue to use my intellectual skills, but see if I can do something a little bit more broadly applicable in the world for myself personally. And I had never really wanted to be a lawyer. Growing up, everybody kept telling me you'd be a great lawyer, and I'd say, shut up. Thank you for your unsolicited advice about what I should do with my life.
Yes.
And the funny thing, though, is after I got into my philosophy PhD program and got the fellowship at the University of Hawaii at the East-West Center, I started looking into what other things I really could be doing. And actually the law kept coming up. I did personality inventory, and all this, and it was really interesting. And I said, well, let me look into it. And I tell you what, I loved it. And for those of you out there who are lawyers or are in law school or know people who are, I'm sure you think I'm nuts. I'm in a very tiny percentage of people, but I actually loved law school. I actually love the practice of law. I read law, think about law, talk about law. Even in my spare time, I find it relaxing and fun and interesting. So
Wow.
I'm sort of unusual that way. Yeah, as I was telling you earlier, David, I listen to law stuff in my spare time all the time. Like in the morning, even when I'm getting ready, I'm listening to, podcasts about immigration law. I just think it's great. So that's what it is.
You just sound like a party animal.
That's right. Don't get near my house because you won't be able to stand the heat. Let me tell
All
you.
those caggers and
That's right.
naked women running around.
Hey, they're interested in immigration law too, so it all works out.
So when did you graduate with your law degree?
That was in 2002, and I went to law school in Los Angeles, which I loved that experience as well. LA is just a great
Madonna
city.
lives there.
Oh, and I will say, thank you for mentioning that. I lived a 5-minute walk from Madonna's house. However, she had just left before I moved there. So it was really funny. So Jenna Elfman, is that right? The woman from Dharma and Greg.
Yeah.
She moved into that house, and there was a big sign on the front gate that said, please don't bother us. The former occupant of this abode or this dwelling no longer lives here. So it's kind of funny, people would go and try to camp out in Madonna's house.
Really?
And she's like, she's not here anymore. Go away kind of thing,
But you had your cam on the house just in case.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I didn't really do much studying in law school. I just camped out and had the cam just
don't
make sure I
blame
get a
you.
Madonna sighting going.
Well,
yeah.
I want to talk more about that in our next segment. I want to remind our listeners that they can tweet us questions for Dr. Shah about immigration or Madonna even.
That's right.
At David L. 2490, and we'll be back right after these messages.
The Fort Bend Playbook is live this summer for an hour and a half every Thursday from 4 to 5:30 p.m.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I think coach swimming has different expectations. Therefore, you got to look good, you play good, you feel good.
I've seen Cody Cunningham's tape from this spring. He seems to have more confidence inside the pocket.
Join Aston Jean Lewis and M.A. Pate as they continue their coverage of Fort Bend ISD athletics. only on KBRZSports.com.
Do you trust your insurance agent? Hi, my name is David Lorms. Anyone can sell you insurance, but I have the unique perspective and experience of being a former claims professional. It's when you need to use your insurance that you really depend on a seasoned professional where customer satisfaction is number one. I can be reached at 713-688-8669, and all calls are rolled to my personal cell phone after hours. You can also visit lormsinsuranceservices.com. Hey, I have to sleep at night, so I need to make sure you're covered.
This is David Altenburn of Altenburn & Associates, a litigation-based law firm here in Houston that handles personal injury, divorce, business law consulting and litigation, and criminal law matters. We work hard for the justice our clients deserve, earning client trust and opponent respect one case at a time. I'm honored to have been selected top lawyers for the people, top lawyers, and ask the expert in personal injury for the Lawyers of Houston directory. Call us today, 713-961-8012. Website, attorneyaltenburn.com.
KBRZ Sports Radio strives to bring our listeners the most up-to-date, comprehensive high school varsity sports coverage available in the Fort Bend County area. We're committed to providing the latest news and information on standings, statistics, schedules, team and school information, as well as community-focused programs. Our programs allow our advertisers the opportunity to share information about their products and services with our audience. Advertisers can target their ideal customers, build brand awareness and customer loyalty, grow their businesses, and partner with a company that is rooted and committed to the Fort Bend County community. For advertising information, call Russ Johns at 206-930-7440 or log on to www.kbrzsports.com. Performance Pilates and GTC Gym and Training Center in Greatwood are your answer to getting spring break swimsuit ready. We offer private and small group personal training and Pilates classes. GTC now with 24-hour access. Call 281-224-0013. More information at greatwoodtrainingcenter.com or performance-pilates.com.
And we're back with Dr. Anuj Shah, immigration attorney here in Houston. And before we went to break, we were talking about the fact that you were in school in Los Angeles, and right? And right. What were you studying there?
So that's where I went to law school. I went to law school at the University of Southern California, USC. Some people call it the University of Spoiled Children. Definitely was not the University of South Carolina, although there's nothing wrong with that. But no, I was on the West Coast in Los Angeles.
Well, and I'm sad to hear that because California's so pretty.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that here you are in Los Angeles, a city that perfect opportunity to explore your film interest and your prior background in school. But law was much more attractive to you. Would you say that?
Well, it's interesting you raise that point, David, because what actually happened was this. When I'm a really big tennis fan, and that will come up later in the broadcast perhaps if we talk about other things. And when I was looking at, okay, so I started, as I was saying, looking into what other things could I do, because I did want to engage my intellect. I wanted to continue to have that, but I didn't want to be a philosophy professor, right, and go into academia proper.
Right.
The law kept coming up, and then within the law, I said, well, what am I going to do, because my perception of the law was like most people, is just Hollywood. You see what's in Hollywood, and you're going to go to court, and you're going to do these fabulous, really dramatic, speeches in front of a jury, and I don't know, I didn't really know what it all entailed. And then I started reading more into it, and there's a million types of law, and there's just so many types of different areas of practice and ways people can practice law. It boggles the mind sometimes. But one thing that came up was sports law. And I read something that almost 100% of sports agents were lawyers. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be Martina Hingis's or Monica Selis's tennis agent, right? I think I had a little more realism. I didn't think I'd
show me the money.
That's right. Those are two of my favorite all-time tennis players on the women's side, by the way. That's right. Yeah, show me the money. Exactly, Jerry Maguire. And that was right around the time I was in graduate school in my PhD program. Jerry Maguire came out in 1996, and so it was perfect timing. But yeah, so that's kind of what I thought. But then I went to law school, and that's why I chose to go to law school in California at the University of Southern California, because they were going to have a good entertainment and sports law component. But after my first year of law school, which is sort of for people who might know, it's just you get your basics. You do all your core type classes, your constitutional law and your contract law and your this law and that law. And I just found the whole thing so fascinating that I didn't feel like I wanted to stay wedded to just one area of law. And then, if we talk about it in a little bit, I'll sort of share briefly how I ended up in immigration law, which was really very kind of almost by accident. But this is where I'm at, and I've been doing it for the last 8 years, and I love it. It's great.
Well, and you have a pretty thriving practice, I have to say, because I've known you for a couple of years, and I've known that your business has just ramped up unbelievably. Why don't we talk about a little bit about how you did get into immigration law and what's happening in Texas?
Sure. Well, if I can step back for just a few seconds and just say, so after law school, I was offered a job in California at a large firm, but I went ahead and came back to Houston. I was offered a job at a large firm here too called Vincent & Elkins, and had a wonderful opportunity there and wonderful experience, lovely people. I just went to their prom a few months ago, but after, less than 2 years, I kind of didn't feel like that was really a good fit for me, sort of a big firm life,
Right.
And so I went and clerked for a federal judge, which was a wonderful opportunity. For people who know about that, that's just a great opportunity that you just have to take if you get it.
Like an internship, right?
Kind of, but I mean, it's sort of, those are people who've already been through law school, and you really essentially, you're doing the entire case from start to finish in a sense. You're assigned a case, and you are the ones reading all the what are called pleadings, that are filed by the parties. You do all the legal research. You go to the judge and say, here's how I think you should rule. I mean, it's really a pretty amazing opportunity and experience. My judge was brilliant, and she was very hands-on. So she would listen to that, but then she'd also, we'd write the opinions for her, but she'd go through and, pretty thoroughly, vet or, make corrections and suggestions and additions and that kind of thing. But that was a great opportunity. And then I worked for a small firm after that in sort of general litigation, thinking that would be different from a large firm, but it really wasn't. So then I went out on my own, and I had a conversation with a guy that I had worked with, a client. I just met him ran into him at a coffee shop by chance, but there are no chances or coincidences in life, right?
Right.
He starts telling me, he says, I'm surprised you don't do immigration law. And I thought to myself, immigration law, here I am, just this arrogant, I'm thinking I was a senior, editor of the senior editor of the Law Review at the University of Southern California, a top university, did great in my class. I have a PhD. Who are you telling to do immigration law? That's for people who wear polyester suits and practice on heroin, right?
All right, now.
I mean, that's
no letters, please.
No, I'm just saying, this is literally the perspective I was coming from, because a lot of people had all these stereotypes in my head, right? And he said, well, it's just funny. I mean, your parents immigrated to the United States, and you speak all these languages, and you come from a background, Indian origin, whatever. And I don't know. I mean, something that he told me had stuck with me, basically. And it was kind of interesting because within just a few weeks, the annual immigration law conference for the major immigration law association in the United States was happening in San Antonio, and I was kind of in a transitional period. I went, and the rest is history. And that was back in 2006. So here I am, and I am 8 years into it, and I'm loving it. I love what I do, and just feel blessed every day to help people the way I do. You also mentioned something about what's going on in Texas.
That's what's happening. What's with the immigration in Texas? There's a big issue right now.
Right. Well, I mean, I'll step back and just kind of broadly say I don't take a political point of view on immigration. I know it's a very hot button issue for a lot of people. What I can say that might give it a little bit more of a global perspective is, I think for people who are not as familiar with the issues, I think they just think of immigration as illegal immigrants or illegal aliens or crossing the border. Oh my God, we're being invaded.
Right.
But if everybody steps back and just takes a breath and realizes, unless you're a Native American, we're all immigrants.
Right.
In my case, my parents came in the 70s, but in a lot of cases, maybe somebody's grandparents came over from Ireland or Germany or Sweden or, whatever it is. There was a huge wave of European immigration the first, couple hundred years of this nation, that kind of thing. But everyone somehow, whether it was through Ellis Island, is an immigrant. So people just look at that and say, okay, everybody came to this country for opportunity to escape persecution, for freedom of speech or religion, whatever the history is. It kind of puts in a little bit broader context. Of course, in the last several decades, there's been a lot of immigration and migration from Latin, Central America, that kind of thing. And of course, right now there's a tragedy, crisis going on at the border where, especially from Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, all these kids are coming in because they just live these horrific lives. I mean, those countries, Honduras has the highest homicide rate in the world. There's a devastating amount of poverty, tragedy, violence. There are these gangs, the Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13. They literally, I was visiting with someone last week, and, they literally came to his house, put a gun to his head and said, join our gang or else, and so these kids just don't have a lot of opportunities and just a lot of future there. So they are come in here. And, there's a lot of different points of view people have about it, and I don't really take a political view on it. I'm a lawyer, and if I meet with someone, I look at your history, look at your facts, and I look at the law, and I apply a lot of the facts. And if there's some way I can help you, I will, and I'll advocate like heck for you, of course.
Can those kids come over on political asylum?
Some can, sure.
Okay.
They have to fit the requirements. Political asylum is not nearly as easy as people think. It's not just coming over going, hey, they put a gun to my head, give me political asylum. I mean, there's statutorily very specific requirements that you have to fit into.
Right.
And that's not even American law. United States law, it's based on sort of international law that was created back in, I guess, the 1940s or 50s around, there's the United Nations, UNHCR, High Commission for Refugees. I mean, there's, refugee law is something that's been internationally around for over half a century.
Well, it's just tragic. The whole thing is just tragic.
It's sad.
So fix it, will you?
You know what? As soon as we're done with this interview, I'm running back to my office and waving my magic wand. That's exactly right.
Call Madonna.
That's right. She can sing a song about it. There you go.
Well, as you said, there's a lot of people who think, immigration, immigrants, Latino, Hispanic people, but there's a lot of other immigration situations that you handle, right?
Right, and that's the broader point I wanted to make. I know, David, you've invited me to speak before, and I've spoken around the city dozens of times to different types of groups. And what I'd like to tell people is, let's step back and look at the broader immigration. We have brilliant people in this country. They're university professors, they're researchers, they're scientists. Sergey Brin of Google, one of the co-founders of Google, is Russian. He is not American, right? I mean, he's probably American now. He probably naturalized, got his citizenship later, but he was not born in the United States. He was not a natural born American. But we want thinkers, we want innovators, we want people to come to this country and stimulate the economy. And so people can get immigration, their green cards or get in the United States or come to the United States for so many different reasons and in so many different ways. I mean, one type of client we represent are investors. There are people from all over the world who want to come and invest money in the United States. They want to create businesses. They want to create jobs. They want to stimulate, the economy that way. There are people who come here because they're brilliant. I mean, actually, there's a law clerk working at my office right now. She was a member of the 2000 and the 2008 South Korean Olympic team in swimming. So
Wow.
She swam with Michael Phelps, obviously not in the same competition, but right. And so, I mean, she got an extraordinary ability based green card because she's that good. I mean, she's on the Olympic team, right? She's not like the rest of us hackers who jog in the park and think we're all great jocks.
Well, speak for yourself.
Well, I mean,
I have an Olympic medal.
I was just going to say present company excluded.
It's plastic.
That's right. But, there are people like that. So we want people who are extraordinary in arts and sciences and business and whatever it is, engineers to come and help build our bridges, And so the people, if you think about it, who are in Silicon Valley, the engineers building our bridges and designing our buildings and whatever, so many of these people are foreign nationals. And we just don't step back to really look at that because it's so easy to focus on the really hyped up kind of politicized, rhetoric about the illegal whatever. But if we look at the other stuff, we do all that kind of stuff as well.
So these people that you're talking about, are you including the class of people that come over on work visas?
Right. So, for example, there's an H-1B, a visa called the H-1B, and there's a cap for 65,000 of them, and then 20,000 additional ones for people who have a master's degree or higher at an American university. And we don't have enough of those. Bill Gates would go to Capitol Hill on an annual basis, as far as I remember, and would say, we need more H-1Bs, and they didn't do it. So now he opened part of Microsoft over on the other side of the border in Canada. So he opened up a huge section or branch, whatever it is there, because the U.S. wasn't accommodating enough for all these workers that we need. There are people who come over as executives, on what's called an L1 visa. They work, let's say, at a big corporation, XYZ corporation, something like, let's say, Halliburton or Exxon or something, in the Frankfurt office or in the London office, and then they want to move that very high-level person to the New York office. Well, how are they going to come over? Well, they have to have a way to come over, right? So these are the kinds of things we do as well, and people don't think about that as much, They, like I said, just because the news hype is always on other things. But that's how we are building our economy. That's how this country continues to flourish, and because of the innovation and from people from all over the world. And of course, there are brilliant researchers and scientists at universities, doing research, doing, teaching, writing publications who are moving, education and academia forward. So
I think that's great. Now, in our next segment, we're going to talk about a little bit something different, but I want you to be thinking about during our break, what's motivated you? What has been a motto, or what in anything that's impacted your life that's, carried you through? Because you've really done a lot. And I want to remind the listeners that they can tweet their questions at DavidL2490, and we will be back with Dr. Anuj Shah right after these messages.
Time and money. The two things an entrepreneurial startup or a business owner of a small to mid-sized business always need more of. iCoach Business Pros, a partnered affiliate with Growth Coaching Systems Network, has answers and solutions to better utilize time and not waste money. Excellence has no limits, and neither should you. Contact iCoach today at 713-345-0223 or visit the owner online at briankaiser.me. Contact iCoach today at 713-345-0223 or visit the owner online at briankaiser.me.
Just because it's summertime doesn't mean KBRZ Sports is off the air. This summer is jam-packed with broadcasts of all Sugarland Skeeter away games and your favorite shows, including the Fort Bend Playbook, Food Rampage, Fort Bend Spotlight, and the newest show, Make It Happen with David Lorms. So click your browser on your PC or smartphone on over to kbrzsports.com. KBRZ Sports, kids, community, commerce.
Hope you don't hear that sound at the 5th Annual Great Grown Up Spelling Bee on Thursday, September 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the University of Houston Sugarland. Support the Literacy Council of Fort Bend County by being a spectator bee. The cost is $45 at the door. Sponsorship and underwriting opportunities are available and range from $75 to $5,000. For more information, visit www.grownupbee.com or contact Christina Guerra at 281-240-8181. Your support can change a life.
KBRZSports.com is your home for Fort Bend ISD varsity sports, all Sugarland Scooters away games, Fort Bend Playbook, Fort Bend Spotlight, Coach's Corner with Fort Bend ISD Athletic Director Philip O'Neill, Fort Bend Food Rampage, and Skeeter Nation. Check back often at KBRZSports.com for the latest scheduled events, activities, and outings in the Fort Bend community. KBRZ Sports, kids, communities, and commerce.
And we're back with Dr. Anuj Shah, immigration attorney here in Houston. And before the break, we were talking about if there was some event in your life that really motivated you or impacted you or some kind of person that was a mentor to you.
You know, that's a hard question. I mean, over the years, there's so many people who really touch your life, touch one's life in so many different ways. I mean, I had people who definitely guided me. I had a wonderful friend named Serpic, for example, who I met at Rice. She was a little bit of an older student. She would just come, wasn't a student, but she would just come and listen. There was a marvelous professor named Thomas McEvely. He really touched me. He was an art history professor, but his lectures were absolutely...
He touched you, what?
Oh, well... He was very influential over me mentally and intellectually. Thank you for having me clarify that. That's right. Oh, God bless. No, he was brilliant, and we would all line up to listen to his lectures, and he was just incredible. And Serpic was there, and she was somebody who, was in a different phase of life, kind of the phase of life I think some of us are in now, past your 30s and whatever. But she would give me a lot of really great advice about what to do with my academic career and about going to Paris and about should I do my PhD first before I do my law degree. And she was a wonderful source of support, and she's still a very good friend of mine. We talk once in a while here. Lives here in Houston. But there are people like that. You have teachers and professors who really move you and inspire you. And my professor Arun Chakrabarti, who was my dissertation advisor. I mean, he was just like an incredible mentor to me. I mean, without him, I would not have had the PhD experience that I had. I mean, and he's one of the most brilliant people on the face of the earth, probably. I mean, he knows philosophy so well, and he's read everything, and he was just very affectionate with the way he would spend time with me and give me ideas for my dissertation. And so, I mean, I could go on about that kind of thing, and I actually thanked him in my dissertation. He wrote me an email later, said it was embarrassing the way you thanked me. I said, look, it was all true. I mean, the reality of life is none of us does what we do by ourselves, right? I mean, very few people anyway. I mean, I suppose some people feel like they kind of lifted themselves up or raised themselves up by their bootstraps. But most of us, you have mentors, you have guides, you have maybe it's a special friend or a special teacher or a special family member, but somebody who can inspire you. And I think I've been blessed to have a lot of people like that in my life. And of course, I don't want to make too much of it, but of course, I did find Madonna very inspiring. In the way that she was so brazen about just speaking her mind and just saying, you know what, you don't put me down in this box just because I'm a female. You know, I'm going to speak my mind, and I'm going to get out there, and I'm going to change popular culture. And she sure as heck did it. So I thought that was very exciting and inspiring.
Well,
so things like that.
I like what you said, though, and I think it's really important that people have mentors, and we do. And a lot of times we don't realize they are until later, and don't take advantage of it. So I'm glad that you said that, because I'm a big believer in that. You should have a mentor when you're in school, a business mentor. I have a business coach. So it's a good message for people to hear. But let's change gears here now, because we've talked about your education and stuff, but you've got another little side project that you do that I find very fascinating, and you have a radio show of your own.
I do. Yeah, the radio show is called Vegan World Radio. And I'm actually part of a collective. There are a number of us on the collective, including my wonderful friend Pam, who apparently is listening to this show. She's been sending me some messages. So hi, Pam. But there's several of us. We rotate. It's a labor of love. No one gets paid for any of it or anything like that. It's purely volunteer run. But it is Vegan World Radio. We are in our 13th year here in Houston.
Wow.
Believe it or not, May 2002. It started out as Go Vegan Texas. And then there was someone else running that. Her name was Janice Blue, and she did a wonderful job for 6 years. And then it was time to kind of change. You know, life moves on. And a number of us took it over starting the spring or summer of 2008. And it's really been amazing. It's a wonderful journey. And, I became a vegan in 1989. So that was...
So that's what's happened to you.
Exactly. That's why, my hair is green. And yeah, exactly. I'm growing a third arm.
I wondered what happened to you.
Exactly, right? I've had over a quarter century now to let this craziness take over my life. But it's been great. I mean, when you go to that question of what has influenced me, I was in college, my first year of college, and I never was interested in anything to do with vegetarianism or veganism. I mean, I enjoyed, just like everybody, I enjoyed eating animal foods. I enjoyed the burgers and the bacon. I enjoyed it all.
My
I thought it was
stomach
great.
just growled.
That's right. I know, right? It's lunchtime. And I had no interest in any of that, but I was interested in health. And so I just happened to come across, and I would, the standard line, which even a quarter century later, it's pretty amazing, is still out there that, if you eat chicken and fish, that's healthy and that kind of thing. So I kind of had bought into all that too, but I read a wonderful book called Living Health. There was a book in the 80s that came out called Fit for Life by Harvey and Marilyn Diamond, and then Fit for Life Part 2 was called Living Health, and I read that one first. It just landed in my hands. Again, there's no coincidences of life. I did not seek this book out. It landed literally in my hands. The universe dropped it into my hands. And I read it, and I was sitting there, at 3 a.m. I still remember this, on February 27th, 1989. And in the middle of the book, there's a big chapter called Animal Products. And I remember reading that chapter thinking, after reading, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't put that in my body ever again. It was horrible, and I thought, you mean that chicken sandwich I ate for lunch today is the last meat I'll ever eat? And I said, yeah, I guess so. And so I kind of went animal free overnight. And at the time, the word vegan really wasn't in the cultural conversation at all. I didn't even know what it was. But another book came into my hands a couple months later called Diet for a New America. That was a book that was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, and it was written by John Robbins with 2 B's. He is the heir to the throne of Baskin and Robbins, but he's so it's really interesting. But he's disclaimed that whole thing, because Baskin and Robbins is of course built on the empire of cow's milk, right? Ice cream. So he doesn't want to have anything to do with that. But he wrote an incredibly inspiring books. If you want to talk about someone I've never actually formally met, I have met him before, but he was never a mentor to me personally. But his book changed and transformed my life, and I think it's done the same for a lot of people. So I encourage people, even though it's 25 years old, 27 years old at this point, to seek that book out. And he's written a dozen other books since. But, that really got me really interested in this topic of veganism, because it's not just about health. I mean, of course, plant-based eating is wonderful, and more studies come out and more research. And there's a wonderful movie called Forks Over Knives that came out a couple years ago that's on Netflix, and people can look at that. But there's so many different reasons that John Robbins laid out in his book, and it's divided into 4 sections. Very, very briefly, there's an environmental devastation. There's a huge amount of environmental devastation that occurs from animal agriculture and animal foods that people don't know about. You would never think that, right? You don't make that connection when you see a cellophane wrapped, I should say, steak or whatever at the grocery. You don't think, how many millions of gallons of water or whatever, how many thousands of gallons of water, and how much deforestation occurred and topsoil erosion for that one, quarter pound or pound of steak kind of thing. And the numbers are staggering. The United Nations came out a number of years ago with the World Watch Institute and said that over 51% of all greenhouse gases are caused by animal agriculture. So that's more than everything combined. That's the majority, right? So you put all the planes, all the trains, all the cars, all the buses, all the motorcycles, all of everything combined, and animal agriculture is still more. So, I mean, I've done entire shows just on that, so I won't say more about that. But of course, there's a world hunger component. I'll just say that because, like I said, we can go on and on. There's, of course, a health component, which I alluded to, and I think more and more people are aware that the lower they eat on the food chain and the less cholesterol and saturated fat and stuff they put in their body, the healthier they can be. But then there's the animal component, and I could go on about that, but I'll just very briefly say I honestly think that most Americans are really good people. I think most people on earth are really good people. And if people truly knew what happened in those slaughterhouses that we never get to see because they don't have glass walls, and nobody really wants to see it because it's not pleasant. But if people knew how those animals were treated, and if people knew how the people in the slaughterhouses were treated and what kind of lives they had to live, I think a lot more people would say, I don't really want to do this.
There's a documentary on Netflix that I watched, and I can't remember the name. You probably know what it is, and it was about the slaughterhouses, and it showed how the cows were congregated all in a big pen. There was no room to move, and they just were stuck in their own mire and mud and feces. And when it rained, that washed into the other orchards, the lettuces and all that kind of stuff. And then it showed how the cows were slaughtered. And it really affected me to the point where I changed the way I shopped. Now, I'm not a vegan, but it did change that I went to more of vegetables that are organic. And if I'm going to eat any type of meat or dairy or whatever, it's going to be organic or grass-fed and no hormones and that kind of thing. Do you remember what that show was?
There's so many interesting movies. I don't know if you're talking about Food Matters or Food Inc.
Food Inc.
Was it Food Inc?
Food Inc. Yeah. It was a really good documentary.
Sure.
And I think that this kind of this thing is growing. I mean, it's not as fast here, but in California and that part of the country, nobody eats meat. I mean, it's just
Well, I wish that were the case. That would be nice. But no, it's true. It is growing, David. You're right. And it's really exciting. I mean, there's celebrities coming out. My show last night, I did the show last night, and I interviewed a great guy named Derek Treesize. And not making up the name, it's really funny. Treesize, and I had to laugh with him. It's like if you look at his website, which is veganmuscleandfitness.com. It's worth going to the website just to see a picture of him and his wife. They are incredibly astounding. I mean, they are ripped like crazy, and they are so healthy. And he's got tree-sized biceps. I'm like, Derek Tree-Size, is that a real name, or did you is that made up? He said, no, it was a real name. But it was a lot of fun. We talked to him about health and nutrition and all that kind of stuff. And it's true that more and more people are being aware of it. There's a huge group of vegan athletes. They're called Plantleets. Is that right? We've done shows on them. There's a guy named Rich Roll, and if Pam is still listening, she and I interviewed him on the air last year. And there's this guy named Robert Cheek, and there are these national champion bodybuilder types. Scott Urich, who's won the ultra marathon, I want to say 7 times running. He's won it. Wow. It's not just he qualified. I mean, qualifying would be extremely extraordinary. He's won it, and he's a complete vegan, right? Carl Lewis was a vegan. I mean, it's really interesting, and people don't think about that kind of stuff. But when you look at the reality of it, it's amazing what's out there, and there are celebrities out there talking about it now, and it's really in the cultural conversation, which is great, and we love doing our show. And I love being vegan. I mean, which is what's wonderful about it is people think that we as vegans just eat like plants, I eat like sprouts and lettuce all day, and that's what I thought. Even before I was vegetarian, I would be on the anti-vegetarian side of debates when I was a teenager, and I'd be like, you people just eat lettuce all day, And what's been amazing about it is I've had more incredible food and cuisine from all over the world, and different spices and seasonings and flavors and types of food in the last 25 years as a vegan than I ever had when I just ate, what we call the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which is usually just have some kind of animal, flesh with, a little bit of garnish of vegetables. Right. Which is also probably why we have such a giant, obesity epidemic and, more whatever. We all know that. And there's just a real, and that's why the healthcare crisis is such a crisis, and why there was such a huge dialogue on Obamacare. We wouldn't even really need to have a giant dialogue in this conversation in this country about healthcare if people ate a plant-based diet. It would be because that's more preventative, you see. Right.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, that sounds, I might want to know a little bit about it. What would be the book I mean, we definitely want to tell them your show. So
Sure.
how can they listen to your show?
So go to veganworldradio.org. You can listen. It's on KPFT 90.1 FM every Tuesday night from 8 to 9 p.m. here in Houston Central Standard Time. And you can listen on the archives as well. So if you go to KPFT, that's Kite Peter Frank Tom.org. And you can listen to the archives. There are so many books out there. I don't even have to tell you at this point. I mean, they're incredible. Just type into Google. There are vegan bodybuilding websites, there are vegan fitness websites, there's vegan recipes, 10 million of them. And there's so many different ways to be vegan too, There are raw vegans, there are people who eat everything under the sun. There are what we call dirty vegans, like you can eat all the fun foods, Philly cheesesteaks and french fries and pies and cream puffs and everything, but just the vegan versions of them, which are great.
Well, all right.
Anyway.
Well, if any of the listeners have questions for Dr. Shah, either about immigration or veganism, please tweet them at DavidL2490, and we will answer those questions right after these messages.
Tired of going to the same restaurants every week? Want to know what new eateries have opened up recently? Tune in to the Food Rampage as Dominique and Priya dish about their favorite restaurants. Catch us live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on kbrzsports.com and iHeartRadio for the live show. Be sure and follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at Food Monsters. Join us as we rampage through the Houston area.
Looking for a way to be involved in Fort Bend ISD varsity sports? Want to sponsor a team, game, or hear your child's name mentioned during a Fort Bend ISD varsity game? KBRZ Sports can broadcast your business or personal message for a reasonable price. Contact our sales department at www.kbrzsports.com for more information on how you can be part of Fort Bend ISD Sports. KBRZ Sports, connecting Fort Bend County business owners, families, and Fort Bend ISD varsity sports.
Do you trust your insurance agent? Hi, my name is David Lorms. Anyone can sell you insurance, but I have the unique perspective and experience of being a former claims professional. It's when you need to use your insurance that you really depend on a seasoned professional where customer satisfaction is number one. I can be reached at 713-688-8669, and all calls are rolled to my personal cell phone after hours. You can also visit lormsinsuranceservices.com. Hey, I have to sleep at night, so I need to make sure you're covered.
Some of our most successful insurance agents in the Houston area are in the multicultural market. In fact, over 40% of our market here is Hispanic or Asian, with both growing rapidly. There has never been a better time for bilingual individuals to join our team of business owners here at Farmers Insurance District 30. Contact us at 281-596-9730 or at www.farmersdistrict30.com and come join a winning team.
And we're back with Dr. Anuj Shah, immigration attorney and vegan extraordinaire.
I like that.
Yes, and before the break, we were talking about your vegan show, and we've got a couple of questions about immigration and vegan. And I guess the first one I wanted to know is, where do you get your source of protein?
That's a great question, David, and that's continuing the vegan, obviously, topic. It's funny. That is, and I've been vegan going on 26 years now, and all of us who are vegetarian, even people who are vegetarian, much less vegan, get that question. That's the number one question we all get asked. And Derek Treesize last night addressed it, and there's so many ways to talk about that, but the basic thing, and I think Derek said this last night as well on the show, is that all foods pretty much have protein. I mean, unless you sat there and just ate refined flour and refined sugar and oil all the time, you're going to get enough protein in your diet.
But that actually sounds good, except it doesn't have enough butter.
Right.
If we added butter to those.
And cream, right? Right. Well, the thing is, so for example, all these athletes, super athletes I was telling you about, like, where do they get their protein? I mean, you really want to look at, first of all, step back and say, well, where do the animals get their protein, right? They're eating plants, right? I mean, there's a really great little comic at the bottom of the homepage of Derek Treesize's email. It's veganmuscleandfitness.com again. And there's a little weasel. tiny little weasel looking at this giant gorilla going, and the gorilla sitting there eating his plants and the grass or whatever he's eating, the whatever. And he's like, the weasel's looking at the gorilla going, no meat at all? Where do you get your protein, right? And if you look at some of the biggest animals that we've got in the world and the strongest ones, and oxen or elephants, or even the largest largest and strongest land animal who ever lived was some kind of dinosaur many, tens of millions of years ago. They've all been, vegan is a funny thing to call them. They're not consciously thinking we're vegan, but they eat plants. They eat plant sources. So that's,
right.
Plants, green leafy vegetables are very dense in protein, the highest density of protein per calorie, as far as I know, of foods. But nuts, seeds, all kinds of vegetables, legumes, beans, grains, all have wonderful sources of protein.
But doesn't most of those foods give you gas?
I hadn't really thought of that, but I don't think so.
I mean, that's a source, I guess.
Funny.
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Hey, well, listen, we have another question,
okay.
And it's about sports, athletes coming in from other countries, and this is regarding immigration.
That's right. So, yeah, and I know that the question specifically asked about baseball as well, but I'll just kind of broaden it and say, look, that's another category. So there's a visa called the P visa, P for Peter, and for people can come to the United States if they're athletes and if they have a very high aptitude and that kind of thing. They can get a visa to come here and train or practice their sports or whatever it is. If people just want to look and think about Yao Ming, for example, here in Houston, he was on the Rockets. He was not born in the United States. He's a foreign national. How did he come? We don't think about these things like, how does this person come to the United States and join the Rockets and suddenly become part of this team and live here permanently? Right. Well, he's probably a person of extraordinary ability, somebody in that very top category we talked about earlier. Again, one of the law clerks, which we're thrilled to have her in our office. She was on the Olympic team. It's swimming, so she's an athlete, right? So people who come here, at the end of the day, when people really step back and look, they're not. Again, immigration gets such a bad rap because of all the politicizing of the illegal, quote-unquote stuff. But when you look at it, we have people come in from other countries who are going to be baseball players, who are going to be our basketball players, who are going to be on whatever team it is, and we'll take them, right? We want the best of the best around the world, regardless of their country of origin. And there are ways to do it in immigration. And I actually represented a guy a few years ago who placed a silver medal at the Olympics in 2004 in long-distance running.
Wow.
Yeah, he was from, I want to say Kenya. I forget. It was an East African country. So, there are people who come here, and there are ways for us to bring them here. We want these people here. We want them to bring their expertise, their knowledge, their training.
Their money.
Their money, right? Absolutely. So, yeah.
Well, good. Okay, so I have another question here, and it really relates to gay marriage and immigration. So let's say a citizen of the United States, a gay citizen marries a non-citizen in the United States. How does that work?
Sure, that's a really good question. And just for clarification, too, you could be a U.S. citizen, you can even be a green card holder, and you can still marry someone who's a foreign national, and you can end up getting a benefit. But let's just say it's a citizen, and let's say Bob falls in love with Romero, who's from Brazil, right?
Right.
Now, as of June of 2013, last year, there was the Windsor decision. The Supreme Court issued that decision. It was a 5-4 decision. It was pretty tight, but they did say, that the decision was not about immigration specifically, but it had to do with the, I don't want to get into the facts of the case. It'll take too long. But the point is that same-sex marriages are now, for federal purposes, valid and recognized. And so the Department of Homeland Security, which now oversees all these immigration types of cases, the USCIS within the Department of Homeland Security, United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, now has a policy after that decision. So, okay, we're going to recognize it too. So people of the same gender who get married can enjoy the same immigration benefits as people of the opposite gender.
Now, do these people have to be residents of a state that approves the marriage, or do they just have to get married in those states?
That's a really great question. They do not have to be residents of that state. So they just have to go to that state and get married, and then they can come back to Texas, because Texas at this point in history is not recognizing same-sex marriages. So they can go to New York, they can go to California, they can go to Iowa, Iowa of all places, right? But they can go wherever. They get married. I think there's 17, 18, going on 20 states that now have legalized same-sex marriage.
But now, doesn't Texas have to recognize the state when there's a divorce?
That's a very complex legal issue that people have talked about, right? So, we should probably leave that for a different show. As far as I know, and I haven't kept up in the last few weeks, but I think that issue was up on appeal with the Texas Supreme Court. I think, it's like you have same-sex couples. Now they want to get divorced. How are they going to do that? Because they don't recognize the marriage. But what was I going to say? I had a client, two male clients. One was from Mexico, and they got married in Mexico City. And Mexico City recognizes same-sex marriage, even though the entire country of Mexico does. In Mexico City, that district, federal district does. And so we were able to get him his green card through his marriage to a U.S. citizen.
Wow.
So that works, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Things are changing every day, right?
Amazing, yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about as far as immigration goes. You fall in love with someone of a different sex, and you are genuinely in love. What's the process with the immigration department as far as how they follow up to make sure you're a real couple and not someone who's just faking it?
Sure, and I think people probably might have seen, depending on how old you are, if you're a little bit on the past 35 or 40, you probably remember there was a movie called Green Card. I saw that too. In the early 90s, there was a famous actress named Andie MacDowell. I don't know what she's doing nowadays. And then there's that French actor, Gerard Depardieu, and, they were sort of faking a marriage so he can get a green card, and that was cute. And then more recently, I guess, was it 5 or 6 years ago, The Proposal with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds. And, that's all Hollywood. It's nothing like that usually. But they do, the Homeland Security really wants to investigate and make sure that people are not committing marriage fraud. They're not entering into sham marriages just so the foreign national can get a green card. That happens a lot. We've been told stats are that over half of cases that get filed sometimes could be sham marriage cases in that category. So, part of the reason is it's the most straightforward way for somebody to get a green card. You have these really brilliant people coming from countries like India who have to wait years to get any kind of green card just because that's the way it's backed up, and that's a whole different story. We could do a whole, session just on that situation. But then you come to the United States on some kind of tourist visa, you marry a U.S. citizen, and boom, next thing you know, you get a green card. It's not that easy. There's a process involved. There's a lot of documentation we have to marshal. We have evidence we have to, provide. We've got forms the government has us fill out, and there's all kinds of stuff. But when you get all that together, that process can take a number of months instead of, many years, let's say. So a lot of people do that. But regardless of the sex at this point, right, we just, like we talked about, whether somebody falls in love with somebody of the same sex or opposite sex who's a foreign national, that process does there is a process that allows for them, the foreign national, to get a green card. But again, Homeland Security is going to scrutinize it fairly heavily. So.
I had a friend that married someone who was a foreign national, and they had to keep a scrapbook of photographs and document pretty regularly their life together, even after they had a child. And they had to keep a lot of documentation, and there were home visits. And to me, it seemed like, okay, this is not a sham marriage, but it seemed like they were really having to jump through hoops.
No, that's a really good point. And home visits can occur. They're not that frequent. I just don't think they have the resources to. But I've had a couple of clients who've had these home visits. They want to make sure that people are sleeping in the same bed. One client ended up they had 2 beds in their bedroom, and Homeland Security said, what gives? Are you really married, or what's going on? They had some kind of really good explanation. It was a money issue, and they didn't have the money to buy a new bed, and they each had a single bed and something like that. But you're right. You want to keep as much evidence as you can, or provide as much evidence as you can that you really are a genuine couple. So people, will have photos, or they'll have bills of, things they did together. And a recent client I had, he had the big receipt for the engagement ring he bought his, fiance at the time, and then wife. So, and then the wedding ring. So things like that. You just, whatever you can provide to say, hey, we're a real couple. That's the more you have, the better.
So how long does it take for you to get the green card after you get married?
Well, it's not about whether after you get married. After you get married, you at some point will file all the paperwork, this whole submission package with the government, with USCIS, saying, hey, I want to apply for my green card because now I'm foreign national. I'm married to this U.S. citizen. And that process, it has taken as little as under 3 months in the recent past. But lately, I think there's some backlogs, and it's taking a little longer than that, maybe 4 or 5 months.
So it's not instantaneous.
No, it's not like you fill it all out and boom, you get a green card. The green card fairy comes and drops the green card in the mailbox.
Well, I didn't know if your status was automatic.
Nothing is automatic.
And you had to wait for the green card.
No, nothing is automatic. You have to go to an interview before the Department of Homeland Security, before an officer there, and if they approve the case, then you can get approved that day. They could approve it later if they want more evidence, but you do have to get it officially approved by them. They have to review everything. They have to meet you in person, interview you, and then you can do that. And it takes a few months.
Well, what's the penalty for a sham marriage?
If they catch you on that, they could theoretically charge you with a federal crime. You could spend up to 5 years in federal prison and have to pay up to $250,000 fine. So I don't recommend it. Just saying, if there are people out there thinking about it, it's not a good idea. You know what's a good idea? Go to Match.com and whatever. I'm not going to advocate Match. I mean, whatever website you want to go to and find the real love of your life. Everyone will be happier. You're not committing a federal crime, right?
This is the second show Match.com has been plugged. We got to send them a bill.
Oh my gosh, seriously, right? I want something out of that. Yeah, go to whateverit.com. Loveandharmony.com. I know that probably doesn't exist, but anyway.
Well, Dr. Shah, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. You've really given us a great insight into immigration, for me personally, and then veganism, and for telling your story. And even though you did have a pretty nice upbringing, you worked your butt off. And that's pretty admirable, I have to say. And so kudos to you.
Well,
and,
thank you so much.
You know, it just tells you, you know, it's hard work whether you have money or not, and you need to do it. You need to make it happen, right? And that's
make it happen. That's right.
So thank you so much. I want to remind the listeners that our guest for next week is Councilperson Ellen Cohen. And our show will be on a special day. It'll be on Friday instead of the normal Wednesday. And it'll be live from 12 to 1. But we wanted to accommodate her schedule so we could have her on the show. So be thinking about your questions and tweet them at DavidL2490. And remember, just don't sit there. Make it happen.
I see that you're so lonely. You're wearing shades of blue. You're holding strange perspective in your eyes. You've given up.